स्टार्ट घर की बात है.
Right. We'll just wait for some of our colleagues to join. Hi, Bharat.
Hello, hi.
So we'll begin at 4:01, hopefully sharp. How have you been?
Good, I'm slowly recovering, getting back to normal. How about you? Are you at the university right now or working from home?
Working from home.
Okay.
Just so we know that this session is also being streamed live on YouTube, so that everyone is aware of that as well. Hi, Nandini.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Fantastic. I'm just giving it a couple of minutes for people to just log in and join. Right. So we have about 8 people, just one more minute. We're at 4:01. All right. I will begin. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you for taking out time out of your busy schedules and out of your personal lives as well, since work and home have become sort of synonymous. So this is the second day of the Social Innovation Summit being hosted by CSIP. Before we just dive straight into this session, a short recap on what we discussed yesterday in the co-creation session, which was a lot about establishing the current context as an opportunity, a digital opportunity for the civil society in India, and how can that be leveraged? There was a lot of conversation about that. And in the current context, this is sort of tech adaptation and integration has always been something that has been slow. And the COVID pandemic has sort of just accelerated that momentum. So it has become an inevitable necessity. And through this diverse group that we have present with us, we are hoping to sort of have an interactive discussion, an ideation of thoughts on what are some of the considerations that we need to keep in mind as we navigate, maneuver, negotiate this new space, and try to create a digital civil society of sorts? And what does it mean to leverage technology ethically? So with that, I would like to introduce our panel moderator, our co-creation session moderator, Osama Manzar. Osama is a global leader on the mission of eradicating information poverty from India and the global South using digital tools. He's a social entrepreneur, author, columnist, impact speaker, and angel investor, mentor, and sits on several government and policy committees in India and on international organizations working in the areas of internet access and digital inclusion. With over 20 years of experience, he has worked in the areas of journalism, new media, software enterprise, and ended up creating the Digital Empowerment Foundation that works in India to digitally empower the masses with a footprint of 200 locations and interventions in more than 10 countries, mostly in South Asia. Manzar is also a British Chevening Scholar and an International Visitors Leadership Program Fellow at the US Department of State. He has co-authored more than 5 books, including The Internet Economy of India, and has instituted 10 awards for recognizing digital innovations for development in India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. He's a member of the Advisory Board of Alliance for Affordable Internet, the member of the Licensing Committee for Community Radio in India at the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, a member of the Working Group at IT for Masses at the Ministry of IT in India. He is a member of the board at Association of Progressive Communication, the World Summit Award, IPTDA, and the Society for Labor and Development. Osama has traveled more than 5,000 villages across 40 countries and specializes in advising digital models for underserved communities. In times of the COVID-19 pandemic, while the whole physical network and interactions, engagements have come to a standstill, it is the digital resources and platform solutions and networks that have and can act as a major support mechanism in this crisis. Taking this thought forward, Manzar immediately designed and spearheaded the COVID-19 Digital Emergency Relief Program to provide linkages to public schemes, information dissemination, entitlement facilitation, and delivery. Internet support is extended to facilitate telehealth services along with consultation and counseling. The idea is to have a model in place which can be replicated and is scalable for COVID-19 and any other pandemic situation. He has also urged the government to consider announcing free talk time and internet for the needy in these difficult times and ensure connectivity as a basic human right. It has become pertinent, he says, to declare connectivity as a fundamental right, almost to the level of access to food, and make it available either free of cost, free to access, or subsidized to access. I cannot think of anyone better to moderate this session. And without further ado, I hand over the session to Osama. Thank you.
Thank you, Pallavi. Thank you very much. Am I unmuted? Yes. Okay. So the beauty of this session is that it says co-creation, and I would like to stress on co-creation, that I don't have too much of responsibility and I can share the, the failure of this session on everyone rather than on myself. So I don't know how many of you are here. I can see about 13 people. We had a registration of about 35 people, I guess. So I think there's still people coming in. I don't know exactly what, all of you, when you agreed to register for this session, thought that you will get it or contribute or take away or those kind of things. But, what is interesting about the session is that how can Indian civil society leverage technology ethically? So I was telling Pallavi that it is quite a loaded responsibility on civil society about being responsible for, using technology ethically, while, and it's ironical also. It's something like using Facebook ethically, while Facebook itself is using their own platform unethically, for spreading, misinformation or allowing misinformation or fake news and so on and so forth. So, I have few minutes to talk about giving a little bit of background of how we can actually co-create this session. And actually, I'm going to rely on all the past participants in this session to contribute to each other with their own experience, with their own thought process, with their own expectations, and with their own challenges. When we talk civil society and when we talk technology, let's assume and let's certainly realize that technology in this case is digital technology, and technology in this case is internet technology, and technology in this case is a communication system, that is again based on internet technology and communication. I want to also demystify the fact that we may be calling digital or internet as a technology, but the point is that they are beyond technology. They are hardly a technology. They are now a culture. They are now a language. They are now a part of life. They are like oxygen for us, and they are our breathe in, breathe out every day. So much so that COVID proved it even more stressfully, that if you wouldn't have digital, many of us wouldn't have survived as we did. That doesn't mean that the 70% of the population of India who do not have access to internet is not surviving. But I would also like to demystify that there is not a single person on our soil who is not dependent on technology, whether they are using it or not. And that is where the role of ethics, role of being data as a user and a consumer and everything makes so much of a stress on us, that how ethical we are in terms of technology. Certainly, let's also understand a little bit of number or a little bit of perspective that we have, especially in the light of COVID, because it certainly puts us into a bracket of being more and more technologically dependent and digitally dependent than ever before, almost to the level of having no alternative. And if you look at that, 70% of India is unconnected. 50% of the globe is unconnected. Out of 320 million students in India, mostly unconnected, especially now because they can't even go to school and their homes are not connected. 50% of our population is women. 80% of them or 90% of them are not connected. They don't have access device with them. They don't have an internet access with them. We have 3 million elected panchayat members. They are almost not unconnected. Most of our schools and schools are unconnected, especially the government schools. 400 million poorest of the poor are unconnected. We have the highest connectivity through mobile, but the mobile penetration itself in India, or rather smartphone penetration, is 400 million or maximum 500 million, out of which only 200 million is in rural India, which also means the device which is highest penetration itself is 20-30% in rural India. So you can imagine the level of disconnected community in India, or unconnected, not really unconnected community in India. But on the other hand, are we dependent on connectivity? Yes. Many children are, committing suicide because they are unable to connect for education. Many people are not connected and therefore they can't access the ration. Many people are unconnected and they can't access health solution. Many people are unconnected, they can't apply for job. Many people are unconnected, they cannot get a supply chain. So there are innumerable ways that we are challenged for being unconnected, but at the same time more challenged because our life is dependent on connected. For example, one of the poorest of the poor person who cannot survive without ration, but cannot access ration without biometric check, and biometric check cannot happen without connectivity. So you can't have your food of the day through ration without being dependent on technology, on thing. And all this, somehow, the burden of all of which, whether it's happening or not happening, somehow comes on civil society. Is civil society talking enough about it? Is civil society demanding about it? Is civil society themselves using technology to leverage to create rights? is civil society, providing enough technological solution to make things easier? Are they using it for fundraising? Are they using it for communication? Are they using it for advocacy? Are they using it for rights? Are they using it for, fighting? Or are they using it for communication or advocacy? There are so many ways that technology comes as a leverage, technology comes as a challenge, and technology comes as an opportunity. But are we doing enough? Or is that the only Delhi walas and the Mumbai walas and the Bangalore walas civil society use them, and they only do keto and the milap and all that, and they do fundraising, and the civil society, which is bottom of the pyramid, is totally devoid of any technological intervention or usage? These are some of the aspects that we need to figure out. For example, I wanted to share with you is that we are a digital empowerment foundation. We sound like we breathe and breathe out technology all the time, but the fact is that we work in rural India mostly to provide access and connectivity and technological means to reach the opportunities of job and education and everything. When COVID came, we were numbed. We didn't know for first 24 hours what to do. Because when COVID came, the first challenge that everybody was facing was food. Access to food. And if you're going from one place to place, transportation. So very basic. It brought. When at that time when you were going to talk about ek internet le lo ya mobile le lo, people are going to say that food de do, bhai khana de do. We don't need internet. We don't need. But we actually turned around ourselves within few hours and created this, what Pallavi was talking about. And the reason I'm giving example is that it may become a kind of lead for many of you to share how you perhaps brought technology in your life and how you can suggest that we can take it forward. Is that we are very widespread. Pallavi gave you a number that we are present in 200 locations, but that is a very old number. We are at 700 locations. And all the 700 locations across 130 districts and 23 states became a point of relief worker, digital relief worker, digital fundraiser, digital service provider, digital banking service provider, digital carrier for POS machines and taking biometric thing and bringing ration to their house, mobilizing local resources. And we suddenly thought that, oh my God, this wide network became a nationwide service provider who is not only capable of providing the relief, but also capable of providing many things digitally, which otherwise was not possible with many of our co-NGOs or many other local organizations who didn't have that leverage of technology. All our, what we call them Suchnapreneurs or digital foot soldiers had mobile, had a license to provide applications and the services, digital services. They had a license to play a role of a banking correspondent. They were very well networked. They knew how to use WhatsApp or Facebook or propagation or mobilization. There is one center in Nuh, we have in Mewat in Haryana. There is 25 lakh rupees at a village level to do the relief work locally, which was shocking, pleasantly shocking. And they did it only because they were very active on Facebook and they were advertising what they were doing and they were asking people to donate in whatever way possible. And they did the relief work alone more than the totality of DF itself would have done through all over the country. So, there are many ways, a challenge became, it hit very hard on our face. For example, this student community or the teaching community threw a huge shocker on our face that 320 million students are at home and they are unable to access education and they don't have device and they don't have connectivity. How do you do this? And government suddenly started saying that you can access education online. It is something like you have created sadak but not given any cycle, rickshaw or bus or truck to drive on it or going on it, and just announced it. And then we started a digital Daan program, which is like used devices if you can donate. And let me also share with you that we just got 5,000 new devices donated by a corporate, and another 5,000 old machines donated for giving it away to the students in rural India. So, there are many ways, and technology doesn't have to be hyperbole, or doesn't have to be like, you don't have to give solution of an iMac if your telephone line can work. So technology also need to be seen that how, in a perspective of localization or the contextualization, you can use it. That's also very important. I still didn't talk especially stressing on ethics, because I would say that that is the least of the problem to discuss, because the civil society is not only always aspiring to use technology genuinely ethically, but and also fighting misinformation, fake news, which is highest level of ethicalism. But I would like to certainly take it forward in the discussion with all of you, is that when somebody calls that how much civil society is using the technology ethically, what do you perceive this as? Do you see that a scope of this line? And if you can also contribute in that discussion and ask few questions from me, I mean, I would like to bring in lots of more example. I will stop there, but going forward in the next 1 hour, what I would like to encourage all of you, number one, all of you should come forward, not only 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, because I'm sure in every group there are people who speak a lot and there are people who do not speak a lot. So let's take this session also that let's all of us share something or the other, contribute something or the other, and come forward. The second thing I would say is that let's target to have a discussion in such a way that all of us learn from each other through example, number one, and number two, with the anecdotes, how we can actually teach each other and learn from each other, is that how we can take technology to the next level in terms of bringing efficiency, in terms of bringing scale, and in terms of bringing effect on the community. That's very important. And that is also where most of us would have a responsibility also and accountability towards community in terms of using them as a data or providing them data-based services, or data-oriented services. Because everything that you are doing is data in any case. All of us are doing is data in any case. If you're not doing data, it is converting into a data or data point. So, so let's focus on these 3 aspects in such a way that all of us contribute and all of us learn, and I am certainly would like to be enlightened more and more through what I am going to hear from all of you. So yeah, so Pallavi, help me if we are going right, and should we go ahead and inviting people to come forward to be part of the co-creation discussion?
Absolutely. I'm just going to unmute all of you. So you are more than welcome to mute yourself. And as Osama said, please, we really look forward to listening to your processes and your ways in which you have integrated and engaged with technology. Thank you.
So I don't know if you have a hand to raise, but please let us know who would like to go first to come forward and share some of the things.
Wasim.
Okay, so this is Wasim.
Yeah. So good evening, everyone.
Yes. Yeah, Wasim, please go ahead. Please introduce yourself, and then you can start.
So my name is Wasim Iqbal, and I represent an organization called AS. Am I audible?
Yes.
So we are based in Indore, city of Madhya Pradesh, and we are working for creating a child-friendly world. Our vision is to create a child-friendly world, and if you see like how we can going to create a child-friendly world by putting this vision in a very small things, like we start our project by creating a child-friendly house then we'll go for the child-friendly community, child-friendly city, child-friendly country, like this. So during these COVID duration, we got a lot of challenges in terms of reaching to the community. So we were trying to explore technological options by which we can deliver our services to the people. So one thing we did was actually, because most of the work is focused on child protection issues. So there are a lot of child care organization in Indore in which the children don't have any kind of constructive activities during the lockdown. They were having only the food and the watching TV kind of things. So we have explored with the childcare institutions and started some online sessions from April 2020, and these sessions are still going on. So with the help of these online sessions, we got a lot of volunteers who are willing to you know, collaborate for organizing dance, some creative activities, some learning kind of things. So one thing is this, and another thing is during this lockdown, you must be aware about one news which came from Indore, that there was one community called Tatpatti Bakhal. In that community, the doctors were attacked by the community people. You must be aware, I suppose. So we were shocked to heard this news, that how and why people are attacking to the doctors. So some of our field team went to the community and identified the reason why the people are responding these kind of behavior, why they are doing. So the reason we got that there was one fake message was circulating in that community, that some people will come to your community and they will give you some injection kind of thing, and you will die. So because the education level of the community was not so good, so they were thinking that these kind of thing could happen, so they attacked to the doctor. So by confirming from the community, we in our organization, we discussed with our team how we can contribute to providing health services to these people. So we have tied up with some 4 or 5 local doctors there, and we have requested them that people are worried about a lot of misinformation. So can you help us? So 5 doctors came forward, and during 4 or 5 months, we have connected these doctors with the help of telephone services. So doctor gave us some time that I will be available for 12 to 2 or kind of time slot they have given, and we have circulated these mobile numbers of doctors to the community, and more than 2000 people were could got help from these kind of doctors. So these kind of services we are trying to give to the community. As a community-based organization, my challenge is, because if you talk about donor, so most of the donors are giving funds to us for delivering the services, but there are very meager donors who support us for the organizational development kind of things. Like if I want to develop an HR system of my organization, so there is very less resources I have. So recently I came through with this Zoho kind of platform. So with the help of this training program, I would like to learn about any kind of technology by which we can strengthen our HR system, our organizational development kind of things. So these are some points which I was trying to share with you. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Wasim. I just wanted to quickly respond to some of the things, like you certainly shared that how at the time of COVID, when you realized in your community, in your area, in your region, in your periphery, about this problem of children being at home and not being constructively utilized, and how they were, suffering from various ways, and you found the way to connect them to various mental health issues or engagement or teaching or learning and things like that. You certainly identified that misinformation and fake news was a serious problem in many ways, which was giving you extra challenge as a civil society, how to overcome those challenges for the community, because it becomes a belief system overnight, for any rumor. And the third is how when you were looking for technological solution for something, you went for Zoho, for something you went for calling, for something you went for, chat, or for something you went for web and something like that. So these are technological solutions that you were talking about. Let me quickly also say that at DEF, we have been able to develop a whole misinformation and fake news fighting toolkit also. This is purely for the reason that we could share it with civil society, who can use it at their own level and among the people also. So I just want to put that on table, that here also there is a whole cohort of civil society here. And if those kind of things are required, we also developed a whole compendium of what kind of relevant tools and technologies available at the time of COVID, which you can use for either education or for health, for a job, for mental health, for various things. It is like a 20 years back Yahoo category list of reference points of various solutions, where are they available. So one, if you require, can be used effectively. And the more of us use and more of us propagate, it is better, because all of us cannot reach everywhere in any case. Those were the few points. But what is very interesting is that what I found is that most of the civil society is struggled to find the right solution at the right time of challenge, because nobody knows where it is available, to whom it is available. Many people started giving me money that, can you please take this and give us some technology solution, which was actually available all over and free of cost. So I'm sure somebody would be making money also, for making technology which is always available. It's something like these days, if somebody is paying for making website, I'm sure it's a waste of money, because it is available with no money that you can develop. So thank you, Wasim, for sharing your point of view, and please also share any challenge that you are facing, so that we can, in the second round of discussion and third round of discussion, we can come to that one. Anybody else would like to go next to come forward?
Osama, Bharat wanted to go next, followed by Sohini.
Oh, wonderful. Bharat, please. You were also the first on the list who logged in.
Yeah, the reason for that, Osama, is like you pointed out, I was very intrigued by the session title. I found it amusing as well that the onus of ethics was on the development sector and not so much on the technology players and the technology providers, right? So I think just to start with that itself, I think historically, when we think about, especially since you talked about communication technologies and internet technologies for today's conversation, I guess there is a substantial amount of engagement required between the development sector and the technology companies. Because historically, these technology service providers don't really understand the needs of society very well. They're very good at problem solving for X or Y or Z and coming up with a solution. But the effects of that solution, what are the consequences of that particular solution, especially since you also talked about misinformation, right? It's wonderful that we have instant messaging from different sources. But the consequence of having that instant messaging service available is that misinformation spreads as fast as information as well, right? So it is, I think, one portion of the work that we'll have to do over the long term is, as the development sector is engaged with these technology providers to help them understand the space. That sort of brings me to the second point, which is largely that I think one of the things that we need to sort of claim space, so to speak, as the development sector in the global south, is that we are the largest providers of data to understand the state of society currently. Apart from government data. We provide the largest amounts of public data and publicly available knowledge about what is happening on the ground. And what that really means is being not just domain partners, but domain experts when it comes to working with technology providers. And that is rarely thought of as a role. We often see ourselves as recipients of technology and technology services, not necessarily in terms of shaping these technology services. Which sort of takes me to the third point, because I think Osama, you talked about it, and Wasim, you talked about it a little bit as well. is that increasingly there is, for obvious reasons, there is a need to engage with technology service providers. But we tend to deal with them as in a customer-vendor relationship, right? We are a customer, they're a vendor, or we tend to deal with each other in a one-off or a transactional manner. This needs to change substantially for us in the long run, because unless we think of each other as partners, we will not be developing tools that will help either one of us. So that is a considerable shift in both positions for the technology providers as well as for us. Because if we think of ourselves as partners with them, it means we have to also change certain perceptions that we have about technology service providers, right? That sort of leads me to the next point, which was something, Osama, you very briefly touched upon in the context of how we use technology and in the context of COVID as well, how it leads to a lot of exclusion. I think fundamentally, the deviation from, or the points of difference that we have is all of us are technophiles at heart, right? In some form or fashion. And I think if you see the origins of how we think about using technology in the development space, the argument has always been about efficiency by the service providers. Use technology to increase efficiency of public services, for example. Use technology to increase efficiency so that money is not lost in the process. Whereas the development sector has historically used the language of using whatever tools, means, methods, and processes to ensure there is more inclusion, to ensure that we have lesser gaps in the system, to ensure that people are not left out, right? So that's a substantial difference in our approaches itself and philosophies itself, which needs some reconciliation. And I think that is why I said that we need to move away from a one-off or a customer-vendor relationship to a partnership, because that is where I think we'll benefit from using technology in that manner. The next point is largely around technology in the context of COVID, and this ties back to the point of ethics. Is one of the nice things about tools that are already available in the context of COVID was a lot of people who are not necessarily in the development space got into the act of organizing themselves for relief work during the lockdown for various reasons. And this was possible for them because of the availability of a lot of online tools. And I think that was a gap where ethics also comes into question, privacy also comes into question, because they have not been trained or have not been in the field in the development space. Understanding of consequences was fairly limited in that context. So you had people forwarding requests about person X needs food in place Y, this is their contact number. It's a wonderful thing, right? Flooding of these messages is great because that person X received the relief that was required. But the unfortunate consequence of that is you've heard about a lot of reports about evictions post that, about harassment post that, about shame post that, right? And trying to understand these consequences and therefore not sharing that in a public forum, but on a need to know basis, for example, or anonymizing it to a certain extent, or helping out in a different manner, for example, would have really helped. And in our experience, when we worked with all of these new entrants and volunteers during this time, during the lockdown, one of the things that we realized is they're open to these conversations. They've jumped in blind, so to speak. They've jumped into the deep end. But as soon as you talk about these consequences, many of them are open to it, they recognize it, and they become cognizant of it. So it's also a question of how much we engage. So it is more work for us, which means 26-hour work days instead of 25-hour work days. But I guess that's par for the course. The next point is largely around why are we using this technology? Are we using it for planning? Are we using it for coordinating? Are we using it for delivery of services? Or are we using it as a way to monitor and ensure that, or provide feedback to certain kinds of services, right? I think that becomes crucial. The reason I bring this up is how we then think about using these tools changes substantially. Because if you're using technology for planning, you are essentially working with people who are right at the top of the planning cycle. And you need to make sure that you provide pathways using different forms of technology for inclusion for people right at the top, because otherwise they don't see what's happening on the ground, right? Whereas if you're using technology for service delivery, what we need to think about largely is thinking about how do we make sure that that's not the only mode of service delivery. Like Osama was mentioning, cases of food not being available because of biometric scans not being possible is fairly well documented today. It's not a new thing. I think in the last 1 week itself, LibTech released a fairly well research study as well about how tech-enabled services are not really useful, right? How we think of that as a backup and not as the only measure. Not, I mean, one of the principles of technology is avoiding single points of failure, right? But unfortunately, when it comes to thinking about technology in the development space, we seem to have designed it in a manner where it is always a single point of failure. So thinking about that as a way to increase inclusion would be a fundamentally different modal shift, I would say. And on that note, I shall stop.
Wonderful, Bharat. Thank you very much. That was like a good dope of gyan. I noted 4 or 5 terms that you used: rights, inclusion, exclusion, access, partnership. Tech as a platform, or tech as a technology, or tech as a media. I think the big problem that I always tell in most of my sessions are that the tech companies actually escape all responsibility by calling themselves tech. It is not fair to say that Facebook is a tech company. They are a media company. But when you call them media and they tell them yes they are media, the onus becomes much bigger, because then you are responsible for content, responsible for overarching responsibility that how it is affecting the society and community.
I was being polite by not saying people are abdicating their responsibility.
Yeah, so that's very, very important, and especially in this case when CSIP in the social innovation summit, they are asking us to discuss about the ethicalism. I think in a more broader term, it is about ensuring that technology is being used in a manner which is straightforward. It's as simple as that. It's not about the arm twisting uses of technology to do something which is not ethical, which is harming the society and community, which is very visible in a information rich community, in the information high community. I would certainly, before we get to Shohini, I would certainly like to say in this cohort is that it is very important for all of us to reach out to each other for any technological need that we are thinking about, because we usually spend a lot of resources, human resource, money and everything for right kind of technology that we use, but we don't talk to the people who can actually guide what kind of new technology, what kind of right technology that one can use for various kind of issues or purpose that you may have. So I would certainly like to volunteer myself to be on that front, to get those queries, and I will be very happy to bring those solutions if possible. Shohini, please.
Thank you, Osama, and thank you everyone on this panel, and to Ashoka for having me here. I'm not going to talk about, the power dynamics on the internet, which is far from balanced. We know Osama just quoted the numbers, shamefully large number of men are still on the internet than women. But since it's a conversation around ethics, there was a quote by the founder of the World Wide Web in March 2020, Tim Berners-Lee, and he said that the web, unfortunately, is not a place for the women, or the web has failed the women, or something like that. And that is because the gender-based abuse on the internet, be it in the form of sexual harassment, of trolling, messages threatening rape and murder, leaking private pictures, videos without consent, this has become rampant. And it's just not about access to technology, but even when you are accessing the technology, or you have access to that technology, it is not a friendly place for women, just like many public places are not. And the same culture that governs our physical public spaces governs the digital public space as well. There was a global survey by Plan International recently, I think during the lockdown only, which revealed that 60% of girls and women have experienced harassment on social media platforms, and 1/5 of them have either quit or reduced their digital media use. Yeah, this is really something to think about, right? Unfortunately, most social platforms have a very, very high rate of gender-based abuse. 39% of girls or women were, polled were harassed by in Facebook. I think Instagram had 23%, WhatsApp had 14%. The numbers are mind-boggling. And when you apply it to India, the numbers are anyway huge. The National Crime Records Bureau shows that reported cases of cyber crimes against women have increased from, I think, around 4,000 plus in 2017 to about 6,000 in 2018 itself. We have no data for 19 and 2020. The guidelines are also unhelpful. They are arbitrary and unhelpful, and but the whole culture issue is what I would like to really focus on, because women are trolled more than men in India, because we have a patriarchal society, right? Trolls get a psychological thrill out of putting others down or insulting people, and not just you'll see a large number of women being trolled because not many women are and I'm saying this out loud, but not many women are trolls in the first place, though recently we've seen a lot of number of women coming out as trolls also. But very often what happens is that for many women activists and leaders, political leaders included, speaking up on these supposedly democratic platforms often comes at the cost of being trolled and consequently abused and traumatized. Okay. So even the troll patrol in India, which we revealed that every 7 tweets mention Indian women politicians, were abusive, racist, sexist attacks, rape, and death threats. So what do we do? When the lockdown happened, we work with about 500,000 adolescents, both boys and girls, across rural India, 5 states in northern India. 180,000 of them in government schools with a gender equality curriculum. We found that our access to them were suddenly gone. And so, like Osama was saying right in the beginning, and Wasim also, we had to try everything possible, from WhatsApp group calls to, tracing houses where there is at least one phone so that we could have access to the adolescent, cajoling the parents to give at least 1 hour to the children for sessions that we could do. And when it then came to talking about access of girls to the internet, and this is not just because of COVID or lockdown, there is a huge amount of social, censor of girls and women having access to cell phones. If you are using a cell phone, you're definitely doing it for something which is not good, either for you or for your family's ijjat, or whatever it is, or the community's pride. So I think if we are going to go the digital way, if we are going to go more and more digital way, there has to be social sanction for women and girls using digital and technology. So education about accessing content also is essential. This is a post-truth world we are living in. Yeah, people don't know what to believe and what not to believe. So critical thinking needs to be built. We did this with a number of youngsters in Jharkhand last year, and the way they kind of took to recognizing fake news and identifying fake news was just absolutely fascinating. And you don't need a lot of time to be spent with them. You just give them a little bit, and there is such an interesting uptake of all of these kind of things. So I think building a conducive environment for women and girls to promote digital media, and to do it at a local level also. So with panchayats and state governments, and address the problem at the local level, can have really an impact on how women use the internet, and do they continue using the internet or not. The other thing that we have figured is that as we enter the ecosystem which marginalized communities use, where they feel comfortable, a forced digitalization of basic services might work, but without access to devices, to platforms, to dongles, to whatever it is, this whole literacy, digital literacy would remain completely ineffective, and it will exclude women and girls from marginalized communities forever. And so institutionally, any planning or project needs to have women in our plans. Otherwise, unconsciously, we've seen that the planning will be skewed towards boys and men, and marginalized voices will not be included when developing policies. So I'll stop here, but just to kind of reiterate it, that it is important to build conversation among women and girls on informed internet consumption and being careful about the data surveillance, data protection practices. It is important to build awareness not only how user data is used by a third party, but also awareness on how the collected data is being used in mapping community behavior patterns, practices for various kinds of users' interest, whether to really look out for girls who are planning to elope with their boyfriends and then move in, or for unwelcome trafficking practices. This has to be controlled, and the culture needs to shift. I'll stop here and let you.
Shoini, thank you so much. Thank you so much. This was very, very important to actually reiterate. I mean, we all realize that what is the problem around us, but perhaps at some point of time and somewhere we don't know the intensity of the problem and how deep it is. When you were speaking, these were the scribblings that I was doing. Worldwide, can we have a worldwide women internet? Can we have a I was saying, is the internet patriarchal, or is the internet feminine? We don't know, because if it isn't internet feminine, but the users are certainly mostly male, and it is a reflection of our drawing room where all the male sit and talk, and there is no woman. Women are standing somewhere else, or listening from the corner, or in the kitchen or somewhere, and we don't even, and we do it unconsciously, day in, day out. And it is so much in India is just pathetic. So I totally agree with you, is that we need to design our programs which is women centric. We should need to design our technology usage in such a way that women are the leaders in terms of pressure. It's something like, let's say we are like, I would say, give you an example that we have a Suchnapreneur program of all over India, where rural digital entrepreneurs, we changed the program 3 years back that we will only choose women. So now out of 700 center, we have 500 women who run the center. So and we found that they are more accountable, they are more responsible, they are more transparent, they are more efficient and all that. So actually, it was business wise, it was more fruitful, less expensive. But yes, the other thing I say is that out of 3 million panchayat members, 1 million are women elected panchayat members. But we have no programs for them.
No.
They all are digitally excluded. If you go and do program with them, it will change the home also, it will change the field also, it will change the agriculture also, it will change the village also.
Sarpanches, ashas, and anganwadis, these
exactly,
are the people who need digital access.
Exactly. All the SHG groups are women. Do we have a special digital program for SHG's digital empowerment? Those kind of things we need. And when we talk about, the rights will become much more pervasive, and the rights will become much more general, rather than you fight it one by one. Because there will be more people who will be voicing about it. But yes, thank you very much for highlighting. I have taken the notes, and maybe this cohort can help each other to design more and more programs to bring in ethical usage of technology by women for women kind of thing. That will be really, really nice. Nandini, you have been waiting. Please come forward and share your thoughts.
Hi, it's really nice to be here. Thanks for having me. So I just want to quickly introduce myself, because I think perhaps the context I'm coming from is a little different, but I'm a researcher for a small startup called Technology for Wildlife. So we're a spatial consultancy that works for environmental and wildlife conservation. So we help other organizations, our collaborators and clients, deploy technology for the use of conservation. But by technology, I don't mean access to internet and media. We mostly mean spatial like technology. So technology to enable spatial data analysis and helping that for work. So that can be through satellite data, through mobile phones, and through UAV devices, or commonly known as drones. So I don't know everyone on the panel, but perhaps a little differently from what I've been hearing, I am a technology service provider in that context. So I do have a lot of points regarding what Bharat was saying. So I'm glad to have this space because I don't think this is a discussion that happens too often. So firstly, I just want to talk about our own work. Like we didn't have to, during the COVID, we didn't have to work to incorporate technology since it's a very central part of what we do. But what we didn't anticipate was for ethics to become such a central part of our work. I think at least when the organization was formed. So we'd like to pride ourselves by saying that we're not technology evangelists and that we are very aware of the ethical considerations and complications, and we like to have stakeholder consultations before we use any technology. But what we like through experience was began to see were that we had an idea of what we wanted this tech to be used for like wildlife and environmental conservation. We had a sense of the kind of projects what it would be, and then when we started getting projects from organizations of what they wanted to use the technology from, there was a big disjoint, and we felt like there were ethical issues if we went ahead and deployed the technology as they were requiring. So a lot of the projects, for example, could be related to surveillance. So it became like we were deciding projects based on our own ethics and became very central to our decision-making process. And the way that we dealt with it was like to literally sit down, speak to people, do a lot of readings, and come up with our own firstly be explicit about our own biases and our own motives, and put that down into a process of what we wanted to consider before we took a project on. But to what Bharat was saying in terms of the onus of ethics being on the civil society organization versus the technology provider, I really feel like it's on both parties, because we can be as sensitive as we like also when deploying a certain technology that we've been asked to. But if the motive of the project is something that I mean, is not necessarily incongruent with what someone considers ethical. Even with the best of intentions, we've seen that happen where people are, in my case, like literally they want to use technology for identifying, endangered bird species, but they accidentally collect data on someone living near the forest and things like that. So even for those unintended situations, it's a process that both parties have to agree on what they want to go ahead with it, because I can know what I want, and I can, like, for example, in this case of forest collection of data, and I can collect it in as sensitive a way as possible. But if I give that data to this service provider, whether what they would decide to do with someone's accidental data would still be on them, right? That's completely their choice of whether they want to blur out the faces, whether they want to use it to report someone, or like if they're, what is happening with that is a complete question mark and needs to be agreed on by both technology providers as well as the organization that wants the project done. So what we've started doing is that every time someone approaches us for a project, we go through this process with the organization where we first question whether you really need the technology at all. Because in our experience, what happens a lot is that people look at it as a very end of the pipeline sort of solution. And sometimes even in, at least in our case, it's also like a lot about the gadgets and the perception of it rather than the actual use. And that kind of use of technology, I feel like, is a complete waste of money and time. So what we try to find out is like, what exactly are they trying to use it for? Like, why do you want to include like some technology in your work? And then we go through their own process of like what kind of community you're working around, whether or not, even if they're not looking to collect data on a certain community, like even then they need to have like engagement with the community on the ground, and to get some sort of informed consent or like come up with an agreement on like what the best way to engage with the community there is, as well as talking about when they're bringing this technology and who has access to it. To go, yeah, to like some of Sohini's points, like women rarely do. And finally, what we like, most strongly felt like was working when we were trying to work with partners is that transparency was really important. So we, for ourselves personally, have a relatively clear idea of our ethics. I mean, ethics is so subjective, and everyone has their own ideas. So we have made it like we have an idea of what we want and how we want to implement something. And what we would really need, civil society organizations or like conservation organizations, is to also be as conscious of what they like, of their beliefs, as well as transparent about it. So literally by playing out the process and being transparent about each bit of it, about the biases that might be part of it, about what you would do in case of like some kind of conflict, what happens with accidental data, to literally like walk through all of that. So because what we're looking for is like for the ethics to align before we implement a project, since what exactly is ethical is always up for debate. So transparency is something that we really value, and we think it adds a lot to the accountability. So if at any point we want to go back and reconsider what we consider ethical, or like hold someone accountable for something that later someone finds is unethical, then that definitely makes it easier. One other thing I want to say again to something Bharat said was that tech providers don't generally know the space that you guys are working in. And that's definitely true. But I do think that like all knowledge is incomplete, and everyone is coming in with their own, like which school of thought they believe in and what, yeah, how much they know. So again, like as long as everyone is very clear about what they want and where they're coming from, I think that's kind of enough to, at least for a project basis, go ahead with that. And finally, like one thing that we found useful when, like, to make it a little less abstract, in terms of what I mean by transparency and stuff, is just by literally trying to make ethics a little less ambiguous and more applicable. So instead of thinking of an ethical framework that you adopt from somewhere necessarily, we try to combine as many questions and make it as contextual as possible. So you try to find examples of what work, like what questions and issues might come up in that context, and address them ahead of time. So yeah, so for that, for example, in a forest, there are like communities that dwell around it, and you need to be considerate of that sort of possible incident. And it would be different in each scenario, but you want people who have knowledge of the ground and to be able to think of the possible issues that could arise, and take a call on that beforehand and through the process, like if something comes up that you didn't anticipate. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any other questions that come up, but that's kind of what I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Nandini. There is one thing that came to my mind when you were speaking, is that there is this organization called APC, Association of Progressive Communication. I used to be on their board just a few months back. Together with them, we developed a document called Circular Economy, which actually details out that anything that you use, how it circulate and becomes burden. I mean, something like you are buying a device but it actually e-waste, but how are you going to dispose it off, and it's going to affect your life in some way or the other. So always basically conscious decision on buying, conscious decision on using, conscious decision on disposing, conscious decision on it's like in agriculture, people say farm to fork. Do you have this consciousness where your food comes from? So similarly in technological usage, there is this, I would say environment is a very narrow word to see, that you may be environmental conscious just by building one wall or not, but the whole environmental consciousness of the each and every circular thing that happens, right from getting up in the morning to going to the bed, everything that you use and all that. And in technology, there is this circular economy based research paper that we developed, which actually highlights and guides one that how you can use technology as a matter of circular economy, how it affects, and that may be very useful to what you highlighted, actually, and thank you very much for that. Before we get Vanessa, I was just thinking that maybe I will pose a question to all of you, and maybe you can reply in your chat. Is that when I ask you that what is the capacity, or does the civil society needs a capacity to build to facilitate the ownership of digital rights of the communities? What would you say? Do you think that as a civil society you need the capacity? There should be some capacity building organization who should build the capacity among the civil society, or are you in a position to offer those capacity for any other civil society? If you can give your opinion on the chat, it may be very useful to get in touch with you later. And maybe also bring in learning from this session is that, how do we work as a cohort to provide the capacity for general civil society for facilitating how the digital rights ownership can be created among the civil society organization. It's not easy, it is certainly not easy, because you really, as a civil society organization, you have an agenda, either child or environment or food or girl or woman or field or agriculture. Technology comes as leverage. Technology comes as a step to either bring efficiency or something like that, but it doesn't come as a full understanding of what is my right, what is my opportunity, what is my ownership and accountability. It doesn't come, and it requires the whole lot of approach of understanding that we would like to have. So please give your opinion if you can. And now I would like to invite Vanessa to please share your thoughts.
Yeah,
and thank you, Vanessa. But can we also be conscious of our time? We have another 20 minutes, only 20 minutes, because we have to leave this session, because this session is going to be overtaken. It's like a conference room, and iske piche baaki booking ho chuki hai. Somebody else is going to use the same connection to come in.
Yeah,
so be precise, and then we can go forward. Thank you very much.
Points that I want to make. The first relates to data sharing and confidentiality. So as a background, I work with Sneha. Sneha is an organization that works on the health of women and children. So we work on malnutrition, preventing and treating malnutrition in children, physical, mental health and reproductive health of adolescents. We work on gender-based violence. And for all our work, we collect a lot of data. Now, we believe that data belongs to the community. It does not belong to the organization or to any third party, right? One of the things that we do is we always take ethical approvals for all our interventions. And as part of the ethical approval, confidentiality of data is very critical. Now, we have a data sharing policy which does not allow us to share raw data. And unfortunately, I think one of the challenges we have had is we've had donors that have expected us to share raw data with them. For various reasons. It may be a trust aspect. It may be, they're an FMCG company and they see a huge market, in where we're working, etc., etc. We've been very strict about it. And, because we take ethical approvals, I think in many ways we almost have like a guard available saying, sorry, can't do it because we have this ethical approval. But I think as organizations, we all know that we're all sitting on a gold mine of data, and we're sitting on it not because we want to milk it, but because we really want to do something good for the community. And I think we need to come together and have very clear policies on what can and cannot be done with data of NGOs. That's my first point. I'll be very brief. My second point is, I think technology has to be viewed as a means to an end. It is an enabler. It can also be a disabler, right? And I don't want to go into enabler. We all know how technology can enable the most vulnerable community. I want to specifically give an example of technology being a disabler. During the COVID-19 pandemic, as most of you know, there was, an increase in domestic violence. And interesting, so Sneha has both physical counseling centers within slum communities and public hospitals. And we also have a phone line and a website through which people access counseling services. So we saw a huge spurt in, because our counseling centers were shut, most of our centers were within containment zones and there was a lockdown. We saw a huge spurt in counseling through phones as well as the website. The most vulnerable, unfortunately, don't have access to phones. And I think the equity issue we all know, and therefore they could not access the counseling services. So the people who are accessing it tended to be typically the middle class or the upper middle class who could use these kind of, could use technology. But I think where I want to talk about the disabler is that there are some aspects, for example, counseling for gender-based violence. Some aspects have to be done in person because there is body language to be observed, there is emotion to be conveyed, etc. So, you know, as an NGO and as civil society, we have to decide where we can use technology and where we actually have to, you know, make sure that we don't compromise our quality of services just to use technology. These are my 2 points. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sneha. You know, this is very, very important. Actually, I think all of us should work towards creating like a policy document on data usage or data treatment as far as the civil society organizations are concerned, you know, because, you know, this is so important. And I feel that all of us being part of the civil society, because we serve the community, we have sensitive data, we have a lot of data, which certainly allows us to do a lot of more extra beautiful work. But since we all are funded, there is always this thin line between where does the data go. As a matter of accountability and reporting, you have to share many things with the funders, and that can be a point of danger, that you don't even know that how that data is going to be utilized and you have no control over it. So thank you very much for highlighting, and that certainly goes a very deeper into our thought process, that you know, how do we keep on thinking about our digital rights and how to treat digital rights in the perspective of civil society. Do we have any more you know, hand to come
Yes.
forward to discuss? Yeah,
We have Priya, and then we have Trina, and then Sneha, and then Saransh.
oh, we have a lot. So can we have all of them, but you know, 2 minutes if possible?
Yes, please. That would be good.
Thank you. Thanks, Pallavi. And this has been really, really interesting and insightful. I don't have too much to add because I think, you know, after what Sohini shared as well as Vanessa, basically, you know, that was pretty much what I wanted to share as well. And you know, we pre-COVID, I work with an organization called Antaram Foundation. We work with young adults and help them make that transition from, you know, education to employment. That's what we do. And like Vanessa said, you know, obviously we pre-COVID, we've always used a lot of technology more to track, collect data, make sure that, you know, the gaps in transition we're able to see and we're able to fill those gaps. And like Vanessa mentioned, we're sitting on all of that data. So one of the big things that we've been sort of debating and tried to start in some way implementing is also, how do you give data back to the people that we collect the data from? So we collect a lot of data from the young adults and students that we work with, right? The data is theirs technically. They are the owners of the data. So how do we ensure that, you know, data ownership really goes back to them so that they have the ability to decide what to do with that data and who can have access to their data? So can we start setting up data cooperatives almost? So we started that out in a very small way in you know, in one community in Mumbai where we work to really see how this whole, you know, a cooperative manner of using their data and helping the community itself to monetize the data that they have if they so wish to, right? After you know, working with them to figure out what their own fears, what their own misgivings, what their own insecurities around sharing that data may be, which we found were also plenty. So that was one thing that, you know, I sort of wanted to bring to the discussion over there. Who really is the owner of all of that data? It's not us. We're merely, you know, collecting and collating it. Actually, the data belongs to the community from whom we're collecting it, right? To the students and to the young people. So I think from like an ethical angle, that's something that we as an organization have been thinking about with our partners. And the second big piece, now that post-COVID, when all of us are using technology to access, one of the key things that we found was language was a big deterrent, right? Because almost everything that's out there in the internet of quality and of value happened to be in English. There was very little that was really available. There's also very little in, we all talk about the democracy of the internet. Actually, we realize it really wasn't at all. Because language itself, besides everything else, besides gender, besides everything else, became a really big barrier. So that's something that I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, Priya. That was very, very useful. I was wondering, and maybe I don't know whether that we can do that as a possibility, because every data is a singular data, but every collective data is a meaningful data. So when you talk about giving back to the community, community is a consisting of families, individuals, and all that. So when you say that you give back the data to the community, who do you give? I mean, because my individual data is just my own data, which is good for nothing for me, as an individual, because I'm giving you my own data, which is what your question you are asking, or whatever data that you are collecting. But I was just trying to put into perspective that when you train somebody, or when you share your best practice with somebody, how does this work?
So we, by giving it back to the community, we collected from young people in the community, and we work with community collaboratives, right? So young people in groups in the community, they come together as a career, campus within the community. So it goes back to young people who are part of that career campus, and they form these youth groups. So that's what we've tried. We've only tried it in one community so far. Obviously, lots of navigational issues over there, and a lot of ethical issues as well.
Okay, I think we will deal with it, in more detail, and take your learning and see how we can work at that scale level with this kind of approach. Like data cooperative is certainly a great phrase that you have coined here, and that's really nice to see that how it can be meaningfully described and used. Can we have the next one, please?
Yes. We have Sneha, and then Trina, and then Saransh.
Oh, and we have only 10 minutes. Yeah, Trina it is, right?
Correct. Is Sneha still with us? You're on mute, Sneha.
Sorry, I've been talking on mute for a while. Okay, hi. Hey, Osama. So just as a really brief introduction, I work at Atma. Atma is an organization that works on the capacity building of NGOs. And why I wanted to sort of share our views was, I think there's been so much of great insights that have come from how technology is reaching the last mile. But what Atma does is, we're one step removed from that. So we're actually more of an intermediary organization. And our role is to strengthen and enable nonprofits to do what they do better. So actually, the way that we looked at technology was a little different through the pandemic. We realized that technology has its own constraints and challenges from an adoption standpoint for a lot of nonprofits, right? And that was the struggle that we saw very closely, because we work with we work with more than 20 odd NGOs that are a small to medium size and mostly working in the urban sectors, but still faced a lot of constraints in being able to adopt that technology to reach the last mile. And these constraints were around, in some cases funding, in just to bring that on. In some cases, just I think the barrier to taking on and doing something new, right? Like the change that you need to go through. And what the role that we try to play is as enablers to encourage them and bring together like best practices, learnings from what other NGOs were doing in a way to like motivate them to pick up those pieces to be able to reach their last mile. And just as some examples, we enabled them to use our Zoom platform. We did coaching sessions for them on that. We also have put together a collaborative with a lot of organizations in the beginning, right at the beginning of the pandemic, and we're still doing that work where and now I think over, I don't know, 500-600 nonprofits have attended those to just enable them to speak with people, right? So I think the way we looked at technology was that, COVID has isolated us, and like we're all so siloed and broken in pieces. There's no like physical space for us to just even come together and speak, right? And if you're not comfortable with a platform like Zoom, as a non-profit working in a rural or a semi-rural area, you're going to be confined to just your four walls and your area, right? Like, how do you engage with the rest of the sector? How do you understand what other NGOs are doing? And we wanted to create this collaborative to enable that. So I think we've tried to use technology as a sort of a cement, right, through this period, to just bring together NGOs where I think they might find themselves a bit isolated. And the last thing I want to talk about is just child safeguarding, and how just children learning and education being now on a completely virtual platform has raised a lot of questions for nonprofits in terms of just what is okay and what is not okay, and how do we ensure the safety of the child. And we've worked with an organization called the Responsible Netizen, and connected them with the NGOs that we work with, so that they can actually put together these practices and try and implement them as best possible. It's very challenging to do, honestly, but just to at least have something there. So just a couple of quick learnings from our side, and I'll pass it over. Thanks. Osama, you're on mute now. You're doing
sorry, I'm saying, Pallavi, there's such great ideas and experience coming. It may be a good idea to have all of them listed and shared with all of us, because this will increase collaboration, and this will also increase the usage of each other's learning and technological knowledge. So I think Trina has given up her chance, I guess. We would certainly like to hear Trina's one-line sentence voice before we go to Saransh. Trina.
Hi, everyone. No, I also had a data collection kind of question, but I think we've talked about data plenty, and what I wanted to say has been covered. I run an organization where we work with in the red light area in Mumbai, and the data collection is always on ground. It's not based on technology, and then that just became really difficult. Like, we must have distributed food to over 5,000 families, but have no data because there was no way to collect it. But I think we've spoken about the challenges. So
thank you so much. Thank you. Good to have everybody's voice here. Everybody. So Saransh, please.
I think I just want to sort of highlight three things. One, I think civil society needs to be given huge amounts of appreciation in terms of how they have shifted towards technology, not technology, reaching out, whatever needs to be done. So I think a big hands up in terms of what all we did to ensure that we are able to reach out to communities. I think second thing, I'm deeply appreciative of the funders also, and it could be in my context, but a lot of the funders showed a lot of flexibility in terms of what you wanted to do with the technology. And I think the expectation is the funders keep showing that kind of flexibility as we move into the future. Since we have seen their real faces now, we would expect them to sort of do that also. And the third thing that I want to sort of also highlight is, I think this is also the first time that communities are realizing that data are important. I'll give you specific examples. So currently our work is focused on providing support to families to sort of ensure that they are able to work with the children. And we run a helpline number wherein we call parents and sort of ask them. And we called a parent and we told her clearly, when we are talking to you, this call will be recorded. Now, just the idea that this call will be recorded scared her, and she's like, no, don't record it. You can keep talking to me. Don't keep the record. So I think the whole idea also that, oh, there's someone who's asking permission from me, my voice is getting recorded and I am getting stored. So I think realizing that this is also the first time a lot of the communities that we work with, people we work with, are acknowledging the fact that this is something that is coming in. So I think just acknowledging it and then sort of moving ahead with it will also help us realize how do we sort of work with data and collecting the data.
Yeah, Saransh, thank you very much. I was just going to crack a joke saying that, let's say Pallavi forgot to record this entire session, and then calling Zoom that, do you have the recording of this, without asking us? Can you give it a copy? because we get recorded in one way or the other in any case on any platform that we are using. But hey, thank you very much for all of you to participate. It was very, very enriching. I see that not only that we discussed about our experiences, but what I also saw is that there is a lot of stress from the civil society, like Saransh pointed out, that I mean, there is a lot of positive way of looking at technology, how they can be used, and with responsibility. It's not an easy thing. And whereas if you look at the corporates, they come as a business process with least responsibility, but more about the opportunity to use the technology for making money. So but it will be a good idea, Pallavi, that if we can bring all these learnings together, maybe we can create a document, share among with us. It's a good opportunity to this 15 of us can create a cohort of collaboration of on this topic, and then we can also create this group to take it forward and bring in more people and learn from each other. So yeah, great. I mean, we don't have time. There is another session that is waiting for everyone, but I would certainly like to leave an opportunity with all of you to please get in touch if you want to know in any way how effectively technology can be used to reach the masses cheaply, economically, frugally. We somehow leverage on that, and how to connect more and more people. We have certainly more stress on women, but I hope every one of you come forward and work in that area. That will be really, really nice. Pallavi, thank you very much. Every one of you who contributed, thank you very much. It was very enriching. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Osama, for moderating what was a great discussion. And thank you to each and every one of you who made time today. I definitely had so much to learn, and I was taking copious amounts of notes. I will definitely be sharing a document with everyone, and I'm hopeful that we can take this conversation forward in a substantive manner. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you. It was truly co-created.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.